Hello, I will be going over the way we count notes. So this is counting notation. We're going to start with 3 of the larger notes. The first one is a whole note. This is how a whole note looks. It is worth 4 beats in 4/4 timing, and I'll go over that in a moment. The second note is a half note, which looks like this. It is worth half of a whole note, which is 2 beats. And a quarter note, this is a quarter note, which you see pretty often, and it is equal to 1 beat, which is half of a half note. Each one is half of the previous one. All right, the value of these notes are 1, 2, and 4, only in 4/4 timing. That means that this is 4/4 timing, and as an example, at the beginning of music, you'll see the time signature. This is an example of the time signature. The first or the top note number means something, and also the bottom number means something. The top note tells you how many beats are in a measure. A measure is also similar to what they say when rappers use bars. A bar and a measure are the same thing. All right, so how many beats are in a measure? And precisely that means what number you're counting up to. All right. Then the bottom number, anytime you have a 4 at the bottom, it tells you that a quarter note gets a beat. I've explained this before you all went on break as well in the past, and I'm going to give you an example of how they determine which note gets one beat in a measure. So again, the bottom note tells you which note gets 1 beat. So I'm going to go over some basic math really quickly. So what we do is we take this bottom 4 and we put it in a fraction. Let's put a 1 for the numerator and use that bottom 4 as the denominator. So the question is, how do we get a decimal or a percentage from a fraction? Okay, in order to get a decimal, then we will take the denominator and divide it into the numerator. So this is the way that we determine, again, how we determine that bottom information, which note gets 1 beat. So I'm going to take 4, I'm going to divide it into 1.00. There you go. Put my decimal at the top. 4 cannot go into 1, but it can go into 10. It goes into 10 2 times. 2 times 4 is 8. Then I subtract, borrow from the 1, make the 0 a 10. That 1 that I borrowed, I cross out from on the other side, make that a 0. Now I have 10 minus 8, that equals 2. Bring down my 0, that equals 0. Now the new number we have is 20. How many times can 4 go into 20 without going over? The answer is 5. So we have 5 times 4 equals 20. When we subtract, that equals 0. So how would we read this decimal? That would be, this is 0.25. What coin in money represents 0.25? Or 25 cents. A quarter. So a quarter note is equivalent to it equals which note gets 1 beat. So the quarter note, anytime a time signature ends with a 4, the bottom number is a 4, such as right here. It can be 3 4s. It can be 2 4. I'm going to change that 3 4 and make it the correct way. It'll be 3 over 4, 2 4. It can be 4 over 4. Anytime 4 is that bottom number, then that means that a quarter note gets 1 beat. All right, that means that if a quarter note gets one beat and I'm counting up to 4, then that means I need 4 quarter notes to equal up to 4 beats, which is what that measure may need. A measure is the notes that you're using to create a bar. All right, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and go to the next step. All right, so the notes again that we're using are whole notes, half notes, and quarter notes. Let me bring that out so you can see that a little more. Whole note, half note, and quarter note. I'm going to use this space down here so that you can see this information. All right, so the main thing we need to understand is that we're counting up to 4. So I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so those are the 4 numbers we're needing. What is also important is that we need to have dashes. Anytime a note is going to be worth more than 1 beat, more than 1 beat, you're going to need a dash in between each number. All right, so for a whole note is equal to what? 4 beats. It's equal to 4 beats. So is that more than 1 beat? Yes. So we have to put all 4 numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, underneath the whole note, and we have to glue them together, because otherwise, if we do not make them stay together, then they're separate, and that means that it's a different note. Since a whole note equates to the count of all 4 notes tied together, we have to put dashes in between to make them stick together. All right, so the next note is a half note. A half note is equal to 2 beats. So there are 3 different ways that we can put 2 numbers together, 1, 2, 3, 4, in a sequence in chronological order, so that we can give a half note its value. So for example, if a half note was the first note in a measure, it would start with 1. So there is only one way that we can use 1 with another number to make it equal to 2 beats. Each number represents a beat. All right, so there is 1, 2. Another way we can put 2 numbers together to make it equal to 2 beats, since each number is a beat, is 2, 3. Another way we can do it is 3, 4. So those are the 3 ways. But the only thing we have to remember as well is we need a dash. Any note that is worth more than 1 beat has to have dashes in between the numbers that represents its value. So I'm going to put a dash here, a dash here, and a dash here. Anytime you see 1 half note, either you're going to put 1-2 or 2-3 or 3-4. Now I'm going to go ahead and go to the quarter note. A quarter note is equal to 1 beat. That means if each number is a beat, then a quarter note is representative of each number. So therefore, a quarter note there are 4 different ways of counting to a quarter note. One way is putting just a 1. Another way is putting a 2. A third way is putting a 3. And a fourth note is putting a 4. Fourth way, excuse me. Again, if a note is worth more than 1 beat, then you put a dash. In the case of a quarter note, it is not worth more than 1 beat because it equates to 1 beat. So therefore, no dashes are needed. So you have 4 options. Whenever you see 1 quarter note, either you're going to put a 1, a 2, a 3, or a 4. Not all of them together, just one. Pick the one that goes in the order or the sequence. So let's get an example of a sequence. Okay, so if I have a quarter note, half note, quarter note. All right, so this is the one that we're going to do right now. A quarter note is equal, these are the options for a quarter note, 1, 2, 3, 4. And since it's the first note of this measure that we're doing, then it has to start with 1, because when we count, we always start with 1. So we're going to use this option right here, number 1, and we're going to give it to this quarter note. Now, I'm going to put these numbers 1, 2, 3, 4. We cannot use 1 again. The only thing we can use now is 2, 3, or 4. Okay, and 4. 2, 3, and 4. All right. So now our next number is a half note. A half note has 3 options, 1-2, 2-3, or 3-4. Because we've already used 1 and we cannot use it again, that's not the answer. It has to be something that has a 2, where there are 2 options with 2s, 1-2 or either 2-3. We can't use 1-2 because we've already used 1. We can't use it again. So the note with the half note will get the 2-3. The 2 is the first beat, and it goes all the way into that third beat. All right. So far we have 1, 2-3, and then, so therefore we can't use 2 and 3 again. I'm scratching that out. The last number that we have left is 4. Quarter note is the next note. When we go to our quarter note options, either we're going to use a 1, 2, 3, or a 4. So therefore, this quarter note will receive 4. That is the last beat that is left. So that is an example of that one. Every time you see a whole note, you'll put 1-2-3-4. Every time you see a half note, you would always put 1-2, 2-3, or 3-4. And finally, for a quarter note, you would only put, and these are your 4 options, 1, 2, 3, or 4. Always remember to go in chronological order, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you will always work things out perfectly. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me, email me, and I will contact you as soon as possible. Thank you so much, and I hope this was much help.